So today we're going to explore the idea of value in relation to Matthew chapter 6 and the conversation around um, money, if you will. And I think it's a beautiful place to explore this idea and these concepts because there's something special about it in the way that the idea of money or the concept of money or the use of money is used to be able to create this illustration or even to talk about this concept of value and worth. And so it's a very interesting topic. In fact, it's our view of worth or value as individuals oftentimes in the West is placed around our monetary positioning. And so, an individual that makes more money is seen as more valuable. He can produce more economic output, or um, he is seen as more desirable. She is seen as more desirable. There's this conversation, socially speaking, about, whether certain men are valuable based on the amount of wealth that they're able to produce. And you can understand why some would come to the conclusion that the more wealth that they produce, the more valuable that individual is, and therefore the more desired they are. But well, that would be to base um, everything on, it'd be to base the value of the individual solely on one variable. And that can be something that some individuals would perhaps like to believe or live as if that is the only variable to consider. But yet it is also at the same time something that is very much talked about in society as far as um, the clearly and very easily seen disparities between those who have and those who have not. And we automatically in our minds, for whatever reason, whether this is something that we've have been um, socially adhering to for hundreds of thousands of or hundreds and thousands of years, this idea that those who have are more valuable and those who have not are less valuable. And so we form this sort of classification based on income, based on money, because we see money as the provider of these certain things. And these things would be what are addressed in the Sermon on the Mount. I think it's very very beautifully done. And so these two things that are explored are this idea of that money gives us security, and also that money insulates us. So this accumulation of wealth, or the ability of an individual to accumulate wealth, is seen as an individual that is able to provide and value security and value. And so those are the two items to discuss on the Sermon on the Mount. And before getting into that idea, there's this verse that says no one can serve two masters. So here you're already introduced with the idea that money itself, though it being not necessarily, not inherently itself evil, but in a statement of evil is not even made in this verse, because it just simply says one cannot serve two masters. But to say such thing is to say that both of these two options have some sort of um, relationship in which they have some sort of um, how would you say, some sort of pull or power over you. And it says either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. It says you cannot serve God and money. And the question is, why can't you serve God and money? You see? And I think it's beautifully answered in the verses to follow. And here comes the answer to why is it that you cannot serve both. And it's very fascinating, and because it brings in this conversation of inherent value. It's interesting when you think about, I believe it's the Declaration of Independence, or actually the Constitution of the United States. these starting lines that says we hold these truths to be self-evident. And it's very interesting to think about something being a self-evident truth. We could go to many places in the world where this idea that all men are created equal and have this inherent worth and value because they're made in an image of a creator is not something that is a self-evident truth everywhere you go. In fact, um, I think it's Oz Guinness who writes about, or maybe it wasn't Oz, it was some other sociologist, historian, the effect that the introduction of the gospel had in India. Um, because in India, if you understand that there's this caste system, and in this caste system, individuals are organized in a hierarchy, if you will, in which depending on which family you were born into, dictates what position you have in society and what you have for the rest of your life. And so you have the Vaishyas, the Kshatris, the Brahmin, and you have all these types of positions. And this is also where the idea of karma comes in which, well, these if you find yourself at the bottom of the caste system, it is because you had done something in your past life, and this is where now you find yourself and where you deserve to be. And we can understand how some that type of conceptualization or that type of idea can be harmful to individuals because it strips the individual down to no inherent value. And so the introduction of the gospel into the West was this idea that we are telling individuals that they have inherent value because they're made in the image of Creator. And so this is what we see in this exploration of why you can't serve both. And here's the answer. And he says, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is life more than food, and the body more than clothes? And so, he's addressing though there is an addressing of the bare necessities of life. At the same time, that um, much clothes can be purchased through money, and much food can be purchased through money. And so, there does seem to be, societally speaking, at least again, once again in the West, this kind of if you will. Um, not much has changed as far as how we orient ourselves around clothing and fashion and food. And he goes on to say, well, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns. And here's where you have the point that is made. Yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And so, he's talking about worrying or being anxious about money. And, oftentimes, those who do not have, it is very easy to see how, these things that we're reading apply to those that do have. But the fact of the matter is that whether you have or you don't have, you can be either obsessed with the process of trying to gain wealth and your inability to, or your positioning as far as where you sit with your monetary status, or you can be on the other side where you have all this money and you're so worried about how to keep it and how to make more of it. So no matter where you find yourself, it is a danger either way, whether you're on the poor side or on the rich side. Again, it depends on the type of society that you live in, but definitely most certainly in the West, where you can find yourself worrying about money. But here's the first point that's addressed, and it's this idea of value. And so this is why you cannot serve God and money, because the first thing that money does is that it creates a false sense of value. What are you worth? I am worth what I am paid. I am worth $25 an hour. I'm worth $45, $55 an hour, $60 an hour. And so that is where my value stands and where my value sits. I am worth the house that I have, the cars that I have. When we situate ourselves around that sort of value, then we're missing out what Jesus is trying to say on this inherent value that comes from just having, well, in this case, this idea of having a heavenly Father. But deeper than that, in some ways, it's trying to address relationship as well at the same time. And so, but most poignantly, this idea of value comes from the fact that you are made in the image of God. And this is what is being addressed here is like, well, your value comes in the fact that you have been created for a purpose. That's your value. And if your value begins there, then your expression of life and the way that you carry yourself will be very different. And you will feel or you will be happy regardless of your position as far as it pertains to money because you will trust the Heavenly Father to be able to provide all of your needs. And so it's an interesting um, yeah, it's an interesting position there. And um, so then the first lesson that we learn is that money provides a false sense of value. And you can go to the story of the prodigal son to even gather more intel on this specific topic, because what does the son do? Well, the son asks his father for his inheritance that is really due to him at the end of his father's life. But the son asks for his inheritance. Well, why does he ask for his inheritance? Why can't he just leave the house without his inheritance? Why does he need money? Because money will give him status and value. You see? And I mean, it's not a stretch or hard to see by any means, because the moment that he has no more of that, his value is at the floor, and he finds himself with the pigs who are seen as the least value. And so when the thing that provides value runs out, well, then your value runs out. And so there's the problem right there, is that instilling our value within something that fades away, well, it's problematic. So that's the first problem with why you can't serve both. The second problem, or the second reason, he addresses, he says, "And why do you worry about your clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow, they do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in his splendor was dressed like any of these, was not dressed like any of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So don't worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the unbelievers run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added onto you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has a trouble of its own." Here's a second point why we can't serve God and money. We'll either serve one or the other. The second point is that money provides us with a false sense of security. It insulates us. And so you get this idea here with, with these flowers of the field, right? It says not even Solomon was dressed as one of these, that is here today and tomorrow is thrown in the fire. Here today, gone tomorrow. So here's the idea. You see, money can make you feel secure because it can provide you with things that give you a sense of security. That is to say, being able to, afford buy many things makes you feel as if, well, not only does it make you feel as if, and we'll go there, but it also puts your dependency, of course, on the money, and your security is dependent on the money that you have. And so if this money is able to provide you with all this security, then the moment that you don't have this money, you feel completely insecure. And on the same token, or in the same line, when money, insulates us, it makes us feel safe. We forget that it's all fading away. And that's kind of that's the idea with the flowers of the field. Its beauty is here today, but it's gone tomorrow. And so what should you invest in more? Should you invest more in the acquisition of relationships with people, with family, with friends? Should you invest in the acquisition of knowledge and the fear of God, and the intelligence of this world? Or should you invest in things that are here today and gone tomorrow? And this This concept connects with the other idea that Jesus has brought up before. He says, do not fear him who can destroy the body. That is to say, do not fear the one who can take away those things that are temporal, but rather fear him who can destroy the soul, which is to say that, there's this idea that the being within you is, or this character, this um, individuality is what needs to be cultivated, because if it is not, then it will eventually be destroyed. And that can happen if we focused on the temporal. And so there it is. So these are the two reasons why you cannot serve money and God. And that is not to say that there's anything wrong with the acquisition of wealth. It's just, again, can you this is where each individual must, find himself and think about this in their own positioning. It's whether we are putting our value and our security in money. And if that's the case, well, according to the biblical narrative, we are in jeopardy of losing what is most important.